I find that due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and pursuant to Addendum 6 to Executive Order 01-20 and Act 92, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. In accordance with Act 92, there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, I confirm that we are providing public access via Zoom and providing a mechanism for the public to alert the body if there are problems. And all votes, all motions for this meeting will be by roll call vote. And having said all that, I am now opening the Norwich Select Board meeting for September 10th, my goodness, June 10th, 2020. And I will note that all members of the Select Board are here, myself, Claudette Brochu, the chair, Mary Layton, Rob Gear, Roger Arnold, and John Langus. Herb Durfee, our town manager, is here, Miranda Bergmeyer, his administrative assistant, and multiple members of the public. So for the public, Roger's going to do a little intro on how to raise your hand or how to be acknowledged by the chair for you to speak. Also want to remind everybody when you are talking, please state your name and your locatable address.
Sure. So if you're joining us by phone, you can use *9. That will let me know that you would like to speak. I will alert Claudette as chair, and then I will unmute you and allow you to make your comment. If you are joining us via Zoom and you're not yet a Zoom aficionado, you would go to participants, and there's an option there. After you click on participants, there's an option for you to raise your hand. So please do utilize that. Some folks have some communication in the chat. We have historically read those messages aloud for the public record because there are some folks who can't see that if they're joining by phone. So, but we would prefer, of course, that you don't necessarily make comments in the chat. And of course, anything that goes there, we do see, including your conversations with each other. So do note that. Okay.
Okay, then our first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Any board members want to remove, reorder, add anything to the agenda?
Claudia, I would like to add an item to the agenda, and I apologize that it is not part of the packet. It's what it is. It's a resolution for this board to condemn the murder of George Floyd and to make a statement on structural racism. I can speak further about how I envision that would go. As I said, I know we like to do a good process to make sure that all items are in a packet, but I hope that you could understand that this was a decision, a late decision after a period of reflection and conversation.
I would support considering that tonight.
I would too. I'd like to know where, maybe during public comment or somewhere in there.
So, oh, go ahead.
We have a separate resolution, item number 10, the Vermont Local Government Resolution. We could either add it before or after that.
So I would like to add it at the beginning of our meeting after public comment, but of course I allow whatever the board thinks is best. I think what would happen is I would explain the context for this. I would have us read aloud the resolution, and then I would actually call for a motion to have it approved, is my vision of how that would go. So I do think it needs to be its own agenda item. And if it goes after number 10, that is fine. I think it would do me a good service if it could be at the start of our meeting. But of course, whatever everyone thinks.
I think it could go after public comment, like have it be 2B.
Part of the select board comment. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Rob, do you have any thoughts? You're muted.
Yeah, the beginning is fine.
Okay, then we can do it under 2B.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on the agenda? Okay, then moving on to public and select board comments. Any members of the public wanting to make a comment on items not on the agenda?
Linda Cook has her hand up.
Go ahead, Linda.
Hi, Linda Cook, 147 River Road. It's a procedural thing. When you do the consent agenda and there are minutes in there, I've suggested a change to the 527 minutes, I believe. And is that change going to be automatic if you pass that entire item?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I see a Lori Wilkes wanting to raise her hand.
So Raven Grantham was first, but I can maybe Lori next.
Okay, Raven, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Shelby Grantham, and I live at 122 Campbell Flat Road out in Pompanusic, and have done for 30-odd years. And I turned 80 this year, and so I'm scared, have been scared, to go to demonstrations that have been happening in Vermont. And suddenly it occurred to me when I heard something from another state that a car caravan with cards and signs on the cars calling for racial justice safely for people who are at risk, as I am, might be a good idea. So I went to talk to Chief Frank about it, and we are in the planning stages of doing such a car caravan on the 28th of June. And she thought it would be certainly courteous of me to let you know that that was going on.
Thank you. Do you have any other details in place, or is it just the date right now?
Well, the date of my very small group is, as I say, the 28th. That's because on a Sunday afternoon seems good to all of us, especially some working friends and family who would like to join us. And this Sunday is too soon because we haven't worked out routes and things like that with Sergeant Frank, sorry, I knew her before, Chief Frank. And the following Sunday is Father's Day. So that left us, it seemed to us, with the 28th. And the route we've had some discussions about starting out in the parking lot at King Arthur, if they're willing, because I think they're not open on Sundays these days. And I've ordered a few signs, and we've gotten together some sentiments that I will, as soon as the logistics get worked out, I will post on the Norwich listserv, announcing that this is going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Lori was next, I believe.
Yes.
Go ahead, Lori.
So my name's Lori Wilkes. I live at 574 New Boston Road in Norwich. And And I was asking to speak to you. I heard, I listened to President Obama's panel discussion, and he spoke about eight things that can't wait relative to our police department, things we could do to reduce violence, and could reduce violence by 72%. And so I then went to the website for them to see what cities in Vermont, they have a website and posted cities all over the United States, cities, towns, villages that have enacted some of these police policies. And so I looked there to see what cities in Vermont might be posted, have anything, and there were none from Vermont, which surprised me. And then I thought about Norwich. So I wanted to ask the question about what of these policies that we might have in place, not to ask opinions or place any judgment one way or the other, but just to know where we are, our little town is. And so I placed a question on the listserv, and because I thought perhaps more of the community might be interested, which they were. I received many responses, but I was looking for a response from Chief Frank. I thought who would best have the answer to this question, and I was not asking for opinions or placing any judgments or anything like that, just to know where we are as a town. And I'll read quickly the 8 things. They're very short, some just 2 words. First is to ban chokeholds and strangleholds, require de-escalation, require warning before shooting, require exhaust all alternatives before shooting, a duty to intervene, ban shooting at moving vehicles, require use of force continuum, and require comprehensive reporting. And then another was about body cams. I don't even know if our police have body cams, so I was asking that question. And if we do, are they turned on when officers respond to a call or do a traffic stop? So many of the people that responded said, well, if our chief of police isn't going to respond, and I don't know why, there may be a very good reason, to ask the select board. And I did want to let the select board know, you maybe have heard my name before. I was the public defender for Windsor County for 14 years. I represented all our foster children and our child delinquency cases. I also did family law, and I was a family court mediator. And on a few occasions, I called on the Norwich police. I felt a little unsafe when I was representing a plaintiff in a domestic violence case, and the Norwich police were always very receptive and helpful to me. So anyway, so I'm asking, why I'm here is asking the select board, can you answer the question, do we have these policies in place, or where can I find them? Does the public have access to police policies at the police station under sunshine laws or anything like that? Or so I'm just putting the question out there. And also some of the responses I received, most were very positive, but I received some that were almost in the form of a hate mail, which was really surprising to me. But anyway, so that's my question for this evening.
And I don't have an answer, but I do know that Chief Frank has had a personal family issue that has probably precluded her from reaching out to you. And I don't know if you reached out to her personally.
I did.
So,
and I didn't know that, so I'm sorry.
So I just dropped Lori an answer from the police chief, specifically that probably addresses some of your questions. It probably hasn't hit the digest form. It was part of the May newsletter. And then you may have received, in my personal capacity, letting you know to support H464 and H808, or rather than say support, I will say that those are bills that are out there right now that deal with some of the issues of 8 Can't Wait. So I will also offer that. It may be worth asking why it is that police agencies have resisted these policies to date as well. So I should say, rather than encouraging you to support in this space of this Zoom screen, I will say that these policies are currently in committee.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, and if the select board wants to address any of this further, we can potentially talk about it as a future agenda item. So. Any other public comments?
No.
Any select board comments? I do have one note for people. I received a letter from Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission. They were supposed to have approved a regional plan, but there have been substantive changes that have been made so that there are going to be new meetings. So there'll be a final hearing on the regional plan on July 1, 2020 at 10 a.m. via Zoom. The public hearing notice and login information can be found at https://www.trorc.org/regional-plan/. If anybody's interested in attending the Two Rivers regional meeting on the regional plan. That's all I have. No other select board comments? That brings us down to the consent agenda. Is there anyone willing to make a motion?
Well,
I think we were going to do Roger's
Oh, sorry,
discussion.
yes, Roger, sorry.
So I'm gonna share my screen so everyone can read it, and then I'll explain the context. I will read it aloud, and then I invite your comments. Stay tuned for the sharing of the screen. Let's see here. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so I'm going to read it, and then I'll read it. And so the context for this is that I very much in reflection and thinking about the role of municipal government in creating a response to the murder of George Floyd and the protests that are happening across the country, and thinking very much about what would be an appropriate and thoughtful immediate response. I reached out actually to John Langus with Burlington's, the city of Burlington's motion, or rather resolution, and he very kindly thought that we should not adopt that one, but rather draft our own and have a conversation together. And so that was actually very much early this morning. So I will read this. A resolution by the Select Board of the town of Norwich, Vermont, condemning the murder of George Floyd and structural racism. Whereas the founders of the United States of America declared for all people the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and whereas these universal rights were systematically denied to the indigenous peoples of the Americas and to people of African descent in ways that sought to deny their very humanity through widespread government-led discrimination, expropriation, torture, enslavement, and murder, and whereas contemporary American government retains many vestiges of policies that continue to undermine the freedom and equality of BIPOC communities, whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has once again made clear that Black Americans in the United States suffer dramatically worse health outcomes than do white Americans, lacking equal access to healthcare. And whereas Black people in America continue to live in fear of losing their lives at the hands of law enforcement, and whereas on May 27th, 2020, 4 Minneapolis police officers, led by Officer Derek Chauvin, committed the extrajudicial murder of Mr. George Floyd, slowly asphyxiating him by kneeling on his neck for 8 minutes and 49 seconds in broad daylight in front of many witnesses and on camera. And whereas in a democratic society, acts by government must be acknowledged as acts by and on behalf of the people. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Norwich Select Board joins the Governor of Vermont, Phil Scott, and our congressional delegation, Senators Bernie Sanders and Patrick Leahy and Congressman Peter Welch, in hereby condemning the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police. And be it further resolved that the Norwich Select Board recognizes that racism survives not only in behavior and philosophy, but also in the policy structures created by government, and commits itself to being informed by that fact when reviewing and deliberating all future policy and budgeting prerogatives entrusted to the town of Norwich's elected officials. So I'll leave it on the screen for a little bit.
I'm fine with it. I think you should just move it.
Okay. Would anyone have any comments, or would the chair entertain a motion?
The chair would entertain a motion.
I move that the Norwich Select Board adopt the resolution condemning the murder of George Floyd and structural racism.
I second that.
Any other comment?
I think it's kind of unusual, but it's unusual times. I think it's really appropriate. And I support it. But we will have to vote on it, I think.
Yep. So if there are no comments, I'll ask the question. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes,
Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
John, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
Now moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any comments? Anybody want to pull anything? Hearing and seeing none, I'll ask the question. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes,
Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. Our fourth item on the agenda, and apologies to the public, but we have some probably critical town business to discuss with two of our attorneys. So the next two items are executive session. I need a motion.
I'll do
And
it.
Roger will explain how we go in and out of executive session via Zoom.
Yes, so I will move all members of our public wishing to join the rest of the meeting into a waiting room. And when we are finished with the executive session, I will bring you back in. So you'll just sort of have a different screen for a while.
Okay. And Mary, did I see your hand raised for the motion?
Sure. I move to make a finding that premature public knowledge of the Select Board's position relative to civil litigation would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. We'll roll call. Mary?
Yes,
Rob?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. And now the second half of that motion.
I'll do that too. I
Thank
move to enter executive session under 1 VSA Section 313A1E, pending or probable civil litigation or a prosecution to which the public body is or may be a party, to discuss a personnel issue and to include the town manager and town legal counsel.
Is there a second?
Second.
So, Mary, how do you vote?
Yes?
Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. So we will be moving into executive session at 6:56.
So Roger, Phil P. Woodward on the screen comes in with us.
Okay, I'm putting folks into the waiting room. So I assume this lawyer-looking gentleman is with us?
Can people hear me?
Yes, hold on.
Yes.
I'm pausing the record.
Hello.
Hi, Michael. We'll get to you in just a minute. So everybody is, the public is back. So is there a motion to enter public session?
I move we enter public session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rob. And we'll roll call, and of course my screen shifted. So Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
John, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Claudette votes yes. So our next item on the agenda is another executive session. Someone willing to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll do it. I move to make a finding that premature public knowledge of the select board's position relative to civil litigation would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Is there a second?
Second.
Made by Mary, seconded by Rob. We'll go to a vote. Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. So the second half of that motion?
I move to enter executive session under 1 VSA 313A1E, pending or probable civil litigation or a prosecution to which the public body is or may be a party, to discuss a litigation issue involving Great River Hydro and to include the town manager and town legal counsel.
Is there a second?
Second.
Made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Go to a vote. Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. So general public, you're going to be put into your waiting room. So looking to the board here, is there a motion to enter public session?
I move to enter public session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rob. We'll roll call. Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Rob? You're muted, Rob.
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. And is there a board member willing to make a motion on the fly? about,
What would it be?
Sorry, aren't we back in public session?
we are back in public session.
Yeah, I don't think we're saying anything in public session about any of this, are we?
I thought Michael had said
Certainly
yes.
not that first one.
No, a public session about this,
On the Great River.
yeah. I'm looking to Mike or Herb here. Do we need a motion on what we discussed?
We
I
just,
think we would only need a motion to accept it, right? Which we decided not to accept it.
Well, that would be fine. Simply to have that direction
Yeah.
to respond.
Sure. I think we're just sort of carry on, doing a great job. Thanks for the update.
All right. Well, if we have that, then I think that's good. And I'll go from there.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thanks for
I
your
will say
work.
my adieu.
Thank you.
Herb, I'll be in touch.
So, I see that Jamie Teague is in the audience. I was wondering if select board members would be willing to flip-flop and do 7 before 6?
Sure.
Sure.
Mhm.
So I'll kind of cue this up. So Herb, Cheryl, and I sat with the Marion Cross Finance Committee, might be 2 weeks ago, maybe now, 2 weeks ago tomorrow. And Jamie had reported out some information on the Norwich School District or the Marion Cross financials, and some plans for what they were looking at for 2021. And Herb and Cheryl and I thought that this was information that might be helpful for the board to hear as a whole. There was info in your packet. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie.
Thank you. Good evening. I hope everyone's doing well. So,
Thank you.
yes, thank you. Thanks for having us. And Tom is on the line as well, Tom Candon, just in case there's any other further questions that might require the board chair to chime in. So you have 3 documents which we did share at our Norwich Budget Committee meeting, and we've also shared at the Norwich School Board meetings. The first document is a projected cash flow report for July through December for the upcoming 2020-21 school year. We were asked as an administration to look through our required items that we would need to spend money on as we open up the new school year, keeping in mind that both the town of Hanover and the town of Norwich may experience some difficulties in collecting the tax assessments. And so as an administration, we went through all of our normal things that we would purchase. And instead of, we've been harping on everybody to plan ahead all these years, right? We've asked them to now move to a different model and to do more of a just-in-time model, right? So to purchase items as we're going to need them. So what that will enable us to do is to not need the very large sums of cash that we normally, you know, over the past years have received from both of the towns in the months of July and then again in early September. So it kind of spreads out the spending a little more equally over the different months. And things that we were able to perhaps hold off on, like projects or, you know, any of those types of things, hold off on those until the following spring. So we've done this with both towns in order to give them a little bit of latitude on sending tax assessments to us for the school districts. We have discussed this with Herb and Cheryl. Herb was thinking that he would like to try to maintain the normal schedule that we had done in the past. But we appreciate that. But we wanted everybody to know that that wasn't absolutely necessary, so that if you had assessments coming in a little bit later, payments coming in later, that it would be okay to hold off on, the payment streams to the school districts. And then you can take a look at that. If you have any questions on it, please feel free to give me, to email me, and we're happy to look it over. The second item is a bit of good news, because last we posted the proposed assessment and ensuing tax rates. They were quite a bit higher. Not the assessments. The assessments have already been voted on and cannot be changed at this point. So that's the first part of the Exhibit 2 that shows you the different assessments. I will tell you a bit of good news about the Dresden assessment at this point. While we can't change the dollar amount of what we report to the state of Vermont and the total of the two budgets, I can tell you that for now, because Dresden is a New Hampshire school district and they set the assessment amounts in October, that right now at the Dresden School District, we are looking at a pretty large surplus because we pulled back on spending once we went to remote. So in order to provide some relief to both of the towns, what that will do with your Dresden assessment, while your budget amount, the total of your budget amount at the $12,975,580 will remain the same on the total that we have to raise within the Marion Cross budget. Should something come up when the assessment is adjusted in October to actual, it will enable the Marion Cross Norwich School District budget in total to have a little bit of a cushion, if you will, if we needed to move funds or if our revenues don't come in as expected from other sources. So that's a bit of good news, that the assessment coming out of Dresden, when it's finalized, will probably be a bit lower than that. It could be as much as a couple $100,000 lower. So moving on to the second page, here comes the good news, okay? This is assuming, because it still is a projection, the legislature in the state of Vermont has not yet ratified the yields. But based on the last bit of information that we were given, two things have happened. Our estimated equalized pupil count, we were using the 580.19 number, which is on line 5. And now you can see the yellow next to that has us at 603.34. So that has been ratified now. They went through 11 different variations of this number. We went up, we went down, we went up. We kept the same number for our projection because we were unsure where they were going to end up. I have ratified that with the state folks. So that makes a really big difference on our tax rate. So if you come down, the base amount also for the yield, this number in blue, the 10,998, again, that's a projection based on the last information out of the AOE that went to the legislature. And if that rate holds and the yield holds for the residential as well, our estimated nominal tax rate on line 15 would go from this year's, which is $1.8068, it would go to $1.8185. So it would be an increase of approximately a penny and a quarter. I know that initially we were projecting upwards of 9 cents, 9-10 cents, because the yields were moving and the estimated equalized pupil count was lower. So that's a bit of good news there for everybody in this in these difficult times we find ourselves in. The other part of the news that we wanted to share with you, I will say, is it's an unaudited end of fiscal year projection of what we think our budget balance will be. And that's the next document you have there. This one was based on May 4th, and we've updated this at our last Norwich board meeting, which was last Wednesday. So I have an updated version from June 3rd that is a bit higher than this one. It's about $7,000 higher than this one. We are still waiting on the end of year, what it's called the SEER report. It's the Special Education Expenditure Report, which they reimburse us for. So that's where I have a little bit of, when you look at the revenues up top and you see that we're projecting a variance that's not favorable of $18,000, that's due to some of the reimbursables from the special education realm. That may not be as low, okay? It may come in higher. We're still waiting to find out if they're going to allow for some of our expenditures due to the remote environment and the usage of our special education aides and other specialists. So as soon as we know, everybody else will know, okay? But so we've been a little bit, what do I want to say? We're cautious with that number. Then you can see we show the expenditures by both object and subject, because when you look at them in different ways, they tell different stories. The object really breaks it down to the type of expenditure, like salaries, benefits, professional services, contracted services, travel, so you can see where the different variances lie in those areas. Then we also report it by function, because those are your departments, so you can see where some of the differences within the departments are. One of them I do want to point out is under the departments, you'll see the 2410, it's about halfway down. That's your school administration / principal's office, and it looks with a budget balance unfavorable of about 44,000. I need to point out that that's where your health savings account costs go. So when the state of Vermont, we changed the health insurance plans, we now have to refund for deductibles and cover those medical, they're like medical savings accounts, but they're HSAs. So the cost of that goes in this line, and that's what that number may not be. Again, we're being cautious because we project to the end of the year how many medical costs are going to come in. Right now, we're sitting in that account line. I believe it has a balance in it still of about 38,000. So if that dollar amount of what we've encumbered is not necessary, that line item won't be as dire. But it's not because the school board or the principal's offices are, spending gads of money on things. It's because that's where the health reimbursement accounts sit. And then you can see in a few of the other ones, site improvements, building maintenance. We went out to bid for our groundskeeping contracts, and sometimes the environment in which we live in when we go out to bid, sometimes the contracts come in higher, and that's what happened. We had 4 people bid on the contracts, and the contracts actually came in a bit higher. So that's providing a little bit of over expenditure in those lines. So at the end of the day, because I know you've got a long meeting, we're projecting a revenue variance favorable of 26,000 if you look up in the middle of this document. And we're projecting an expenditure budget balance favorable of 174,419. So as of May 4th, those were the numbers, it would provide a surplus carry forward against the assessments For the 21-22 year, because in Vermont it's a 1-year lag, of $200,473. And again, that's an early projection, not audited. The updated number is $207,293. And again, these are cautiously optimistic. I'm usually I'm cautious low, so I'm assuming these will come in a bit higher. And again, that would be for an offset for the 21-22 fiscal year as we build the budgets. So I hope that's a bit of good news with all of what's going on with both sides of the river. And I'm always happy to answer questions, and I'm available via email, as is Tom Candon, our school board chair.
So Claudette, Cheryl has her hand up, but I actually just wanted to ask a direct question that Jamie covered, but I just, I think it, can I ask a question first, I guess?
Yes, Roger, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So Jamie, are you expecting like any kind of an adjusted cash flow needs for the next coming year?
So the cash flow projection that we've given you is adjusted down in order to provide the town of Norwich with some flexibility should you have difficulty in collecting some of the taxes.
Great, thank you. So you probably knew that I knew the answer to the question, but I wanted to restate it for the public.
Sure, absolutely, thank you.
Any other board questions before I go to public? Okay, then Cheryl, you had a question.
I do. Am I here? You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Jamie, just a quick question on the cash flows. I noticed on them that it says Norwich revenues, and then down lower on the same document for the cash flow, it says Hanover projected expenditures. Is that just a typo?
It is, because I used the same document. I'm sorry, Cheryl. Thank you for pointing that out.
Nope, that's fine. Just, I figured it was. Not to belabor it. It happened on a couple of your documents, but thank you. Thank you again for all you do. One of the other questions I have, Jamie, is I had heard that busing, which I believe in Vermont we are required to do.
Not in the state of Vermont.
Not in the state of Vermont?
No, you're not. It's not an actual VSA in the state of Vermont. It is required in the state of New Hampshire for grade 1 through 8. So because of our interstate agreement where we do have to ship our kids for 7th and 8th over to Richmond Middle School, we had this conversation once before, I believe it was a budget meeting with the town folks. That question came up on whether or not we could decide to not bus. And the idea at that point was that it might get a little bit sticky because New Hampshire requires it for 1st through 8th.
Well, it wasn't about whether we would or wouldn't. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to lead you down the wrong direction. But my question is, I heard through a very weak grapevine that the busing companies are going to have to keep kids at a distance within the busing, the bus itself, and sounded like they were going to limit the number of kids on a bus, and it sounded like they were going to have more buses as a result, and I didn't know how kids would get to school, but maybe it's too early to know all those answers, but it sounded expensive in the long run if they're going to have to adhere to some kind of limited capacity.
So that's a really great question, and I can tell you that that's a question that has really been, not to use a metaphor, but driving the discussion on whether or not and how to resume school in person, right? I mean, it's not whether or not. The governor was very clear today, I think it was today, when he made the announcement that we will be back in school in some manner in the state of Vermont anyway. Because we are an interstate school district, we do have waivers from both states to allow for us to make the proper decision for our interstate school district on whether we follow whatever the determination Vermont is or the determination for New Hampshire. So that being said, that has been discussed at each one of our school board meetings by the superintendent. The state of New Hampshire has not yet, they have a advisory committee that was put together by the governor and the Department of Education. They've not yet come out with guidelines, and we're looking for those guidelines around July, first week of July, hopefully. It is a very big question. I am in conversation with our transportation company, and we're very fortunate. We have an excellent transportation company, Student Transport of America, who has all their drivers still on standby and ready to go when we are. And it will be one of the more difficult situations that we're going to need to address and figure out. There's been some really interesting ways they've handled this in a couple of other countries that we're paying attention to right now to see how that's working. But your point's very well taken. It would be more expensive. I don't foresee that it, early thinking would not be that it would double. It would absolutely depend on how many students are going what direction and where they're coming from. So I would say, with regards to your question, everybody needs to stay tuned. And when we get ready to send out the surveys to everybody, parents and employees and all those folks, pay attention to the surveys, and please, please, please answer the questions, because it will help us to plan ahead.
Thank you, Jamie.
So, Jamie, I just have one, just to be sure I'm very clear on this projected cash flow report that you gave us.
Yep.
If I'm reading this correctly, in July of this year, we will owe the school $100,000.
We would only need 100,000 for the month of July to meet our obligations.
Okay, you would only need it.
Yep.
Okay. And ditto with August and September and October.
Correct. And the reason August and September are so much higher, as you can see, the Dresden debts are due in August, and a big portion of the Dresden debts are due. There's about 4 loans totaling about almost $3 million due in August. So that's why that takes that big jump. But for the month of July, we have very small expenditures.
And Herb, just leads to my question for you. Given that our tax bills may be late going out, we definitely won't have our first tax payment in by August 14th, which is typical, which is our typical year.
Typically, the state sends out the school rates by statute no later than June 30th. Jill Remick's latest report says that they won't be available until the beginning of August, which necessarily delays the whole process of the tax billing. So my guess is that the earliest we could have a first tax installment would be mid to late September, and that's fingers crossed.
So how would we cover that 1.7 million that we would owe to the school for July and August?
It's not that the town owes the school that. We haven't realized the accounts receivable yet in order to pay them their fair share. So basically, the school district would probably be on the hook to go out and get a short-term loan in anticipation of taxes. Once we get the taxes in, obviously we'd be getting as much the money over to them as closely as possible. And that's similar to us. We would not have a tax revenue stream in the middle of August, so we may have to go out and do a short-term borrowing situation to deal with that. We do have the undesignated fund balance as of today is pretty flush, which is great, but you're not supposed to spend the undesignated fund balance without voter approval. So, and I've checked with the Secretary of State and VLCT on that. So that's an issue there. But the problem is if we haven't billed out the accounts receivable, we can't pay them.
When are you looking at sending the bills, Herb?
So I'm just looking at, we can always, the board, I should say, can always decide to send a tax bill out with certain assumptions in there. I'm just going from the standpoint of saying, I'm not going to have the school rates from Jill Remick's office until the beginning of August. That was stated in her latest email or whatever that came out. So if we just stick with that process, if we got it then, the board meets at in an expeditious, they could even meet in a, emergency special meeting to set the tax rate. 30 days has to go by before the first installment's due. That's why I said the mid to end of September would be when the first installment could come in. Now, if the board opts to put together, if they've got grand list information or they opt to use the latest grand list information that they have, we know what the expenses are that we need, we could send out a tax rate assuming things, but I get squirrely about the fact that the state dictates the school rates, unlike the municipality that establishes our own rate. So I honestly don't know if it would be legal to send out a school rate that's not sanctioned by the state, if that makes sense.
Sure, Jamie, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm bad about raising my hand. So I think we could have a further conversation about this, and it's quite possible that if the flow in Hanover is different, we might be able to shift some of that burden to them earlier and then have you pick up a little bit more of the, you would have more coming into us than maybe a little more in the late September or October time segments, just because their billing may be going out at different time period than yours. So I'm happy to reach out to them and see if we can, work with them to try to make, some type of arrangement.
Yep.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board or the public?
Jamie, just like, I don't want to take up too much time, but, what is it that you would say, and without getting too philosophical, which I tend to sometimes do, which what would you say is, what would you love if sort of a layman or a member of the general public knew about what it is that you did, right? So what is it that you would like? So if, we're municipal policymakers, one of the things I was really curious about in hearing you speak was understanding a little bit about how the state reimburses for special education. Is that something that you think is something everyone should look into or be invested by? Like what, and if so, how would you go about this idea of like get educated, which is something we're hearing a lot in the cultural world right now? So is there any words of wisdom that you can share for us on that? I hate to put you on the spot, but.
Oh, no, that's okay. I think it's very interesting because obviously before I came to the SAU 70 districts, right, made up of Dresden, Norwich, and Hanover, I was predominantly a New Hampshire business administrator. And so I know New Hampshire side of the business quite well. It was a bit of a learning curve actually for me, to learn all about Vermont and how they fund school districts, because it's totally different, than New Hampshire. And it's quite interesting, I think, and I'm still learning every day. You pick up something and you go, oh my gosh, and a light bulb goes off, right? And it gets a little bit easier. I think that as taxpayers and residents of the state of Vermont, and I'm a part-time one actually, I bought a place in Quechee. I think it's probably important for everybody to understand, how all of the pieces fit together and how the tax rates are made up. So I think if I would give one thing or a word of advice for everybody, is it's sometimes a bit convoluted and sometimes it's a little bit difficult to understand. But I think it's really important as you go to vote on issues that you realize, how it all comes together, right? We say, okay, let's spend $1 million, but what does that really mean when we say, let's spend $1 million, you know? How does that all carry through all of this process back to us on the other side? So I think it would be really interesting if, you know, in this day and age where we're all so busy, right? Going in a million directions, if we just take the time to do like a budget 101 session, you know, so that, and make it easily understood. You know, I'm a visual learner, so I like to use graphics and talk people through. I had a very different district in New Hampshire that was very interwoven with 5 towns and a cooperative formula that was crazy. So I always felt it was very important for the taxpayers and folks within the town to understand how it works so that they can look at these numbers and they understand what it means to them. I think it's very important, and I'm always willing to take the time to come out and meet with folks, groups, whatever, to try to help them understand how it all works.
Thanks so much for that. And then also just to let people know that Tom Candon dropped in a video that explains, a short video on how Vermont education system is funded. And so yes, so I think maybe starting a conversation off list about some of these resources would be something that we could put forth in a future packet for our community. So, yeah. So thanks to you both for that question.
And Miranda, if you could get that link off the chat to for the Vermont budgeting that Tom
I'll send it to you, Miranda.
And put it in the minutes, that would be helpful. And Jamie, I just want to share that Tom also said you were a very quick study. So, but okay, thank you very much, Jamie. I hope the board found that helpful. I know I did. So
anytime, I'm happy to come.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if the board will indulge me in a 10-minute break now, and then we'll come back to the outstanding positions.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so we are going to break for 10 minutes now. We'll be back at 8:58. Thank you. 8:58, I'm going to resume the select board meeting. And I anticipate that John will be joining us very shortly. Okay, moving back up to outstanding positions, outstanding open positions to town committees and commissions.
Can I share my screen and talk a little bit about the table work?
Absolutely.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so really quickly, this table was just like quickly updated. So Rob Gear, in the middle of our appointment process, had the good sense to start to table it out, right? And so he put this in Excel, and then I made some updates to this, right? So what people saw in the packet was the first stab, and then what you're seeing on your screen right now, and what hopefully you'll see by the end of this meeting is like a more fully updated table, so we know what to move. The goal would be to figure out what we need to advertise for, and maybe answer other kinds of questions, such as, you know, can we think about making some updates to the website? And if we make some updates to the website, can it be in all one place and easy for Miranda to do that work? You know, lots of other things. So really quickly going through, this is the status of committee appointments, but also elected officials. Obviously, you know, the elected offices are outside of our prerogative, but it makes good sense for us to understand what's happening just as officials. So, and I learned some things in talking to Bonnie, and then I also talked a little bit to Miranda today as well. Okay, so we can go through this. Does that make sense? Or do we want to just, what do we want to do? That was a question. What do we want to do?
Going through it for clarification would help me.
Okay, cool. So for the Cemetery Commission, that is an elected office, there is 5 seats. The current number is 4. There is 1 vacant seat. My understanding from Bonnie is that the commission handles interim appointments. Dan Goulet was appointed by the commission to replace Demo. She has not yet heard if someone is going to run in that interim seat. And so there's that. And by the way, anything relating to elected offices is a result of a good conversation with Bonnie, but like my debriefing to you is not the final word on that. Is, I don't want to speak for her. But yeah, that's the update on the Cemetery Commission. The Conservation Commission is 9 seats. It's unclear to me what the current number is or what the vacant seats are. So that is something that we need to check. But I also want to ask, Rob, you put Mary Selman 2020. Can you just explain your question on that?
Yeah, it looked as if her seat was expiring this year. I didn't know whether or not she had requested to be selected again, appointed again.
Okay, so I think the concert. So that's something that I can send. I'll send notice to the Conservation Commission. Unless, Miranda, do you have any other context to add to that? I know you referenced, you have a sheet in your office that you have the handwritten names of folks on. Is there anything to update? Do we know the current number?
No, yeah, I don't have any information about Mary Selman. I have the same thing that you guys do.
Okay, so conservation, we need to figure out tomorrow, first thing, or as soon as we hear from the Conservation Commission, what is going on, so we can figure out how to advertise that. My question next for the Trail Subcommittee, my question to this group is: in the past, we have appointed members of that subcommittee. Is that right?
I can't remember ever appointing anybody to that.
Claudette, do you?
No.
Okay.
Trail committee is generally a bunch of volunteers. It's never been formalized.
Okay, so great. So that was what I was doing.
And usually for subcommittees, generally, I think the main committee usually appoints them unless there's some change to that.
Right. So that makes sense to me. I think there's kind of there's a chair of that subcommittee. It might make sense to ask that chair, like I guess Nick in this case, maybe list the members on the website. That would help with some clarity. So I'm going to write that down. So we need to figure out the number of vacancy for Conservation Commission, and we need to figure out, we need to ask if Nick would be willing to put the members of the trail subcommittees on the website. Development Review Board, right now, they're entitled to 2 alternates. There's 1 vacancy for the alternate. So we would need to advertise for that alternate position. We're good on energy. We're good on finance committee, but we should suggest to their chair that the length of terms for each member has not been determined. And so they should look to do that, but we could recommend at a future meeting that they look to do that. That makes sense? Yeah, okay. Historic preservation, it's 7, but they have room up to 9 in their charge. They don't have any vacant seats right now. The lister's position is an elected office. My understanding is that will be on the August ballot, and the candidate would have to run again in March for a 3-year seat. So they would be, my understanding is, and Herb might have some additional insight, and again, in no way, Bonnie is the good authority on this, is that the ballot candidate would be replacing the seat, the vacancy to March, and then again there would be a 3-year seat that would open, is my understanding.
Can you go back to that, please, the listers?
Sure. There's 3, it's an elected office. There are 3 seats. There are currently 2. There is a vacant seat, and that my note is that this will be on the August ballot as of now. Bonnie has confirmed that there was a petition submitted, and they would have to run again in March for a 3-year seat. And so I'm not necessarily saying we need to discuss this at length.
Okay, can I throw 2 cents into that?
Sure, yes, please.
Okay, so Chris Clement resigned from the lister seat,
Yes.
And what's going to happen is August, when there's a vacancy, typically the select board would appoint. In this event, they haven't appointed. When the special town meeting came up, I did have a candidate come forward to apply for that position. This person will hold that position if elected from August until March 1st, which is when Chris's term would have ended. And at that point, they have the ability, if they would like, to take out a 3-year petition for next town meeting and run for her full term. So right now you're filling her unexpired term, not her seat.
Okay, the unexpired term is the better phrasing. So thank you.
I still have a question on that. So do we have a consistent practice and policy if someone leaves a seat that then we advertise and appoint?
You have to at least make an attempt to appoint somebody. Somebody has to show interest.
Right.
And you're supposed to, with an elected position, it's supposed to be forthwith. So, because he...
Okay, go ahead.
So, you advertised, somebody did apply. I wasn't present at that meeting. For some reason, that person was not appointed. But the vacancy is still there, so anyone is entitled to run either at the next special or annual town meeting.
I think that part is clear.
Rob
What's not clear in my mind is our appointing or lack of appointing, and whether I just want us to be consistent in how we behave, committee to committee.
I do think it's important to clarify though, because we're in a public meeting and there's been a lot of confusion about this. This has never been advertised. This position has never been advertised.
Right.
And it should have been.
Yeah, that's the other part of it, is it should have been.
Well, that's what we're talking about, but Bonnie just said it was advertised and we got an application, and that is not correct. And
I thought that somebody had extended, I thought someone had extended out the vacancy in that office.
So,
but
just as a point, I know there's actually, so Rob has his hand up, Claudette, and then and Cheryl has her hand up. But I do wonder if we could maybe go through the rest of it just really quick. And then return listers, and then also talk about process for advertising and that kind of thing.
It's fine with me.
That sounds like a plan.
Okay. So Justice of the Peace, also elected. We're all fine with that. I learned today from Bonnie, fun fact, that the political party makes a recommendation when there's a vacancy, and the clerk, not the clerk, forwards that recommendation to the governor's office, which I found. I don't know if anyone else knew that, but I loved learning that. Solid Waste Committee, there's 5. There's 1, we should advertise for the 4 positions. The next 2 are elected offices, the agent to prosecute and defend suits. It's 1 position, there's 1 vacancy. And as of right now, because there's not a candidate that has come forward, it is not slated to be on the August ballot. I'll summarize the trustee of public funds, and then maybe Bonnie in her own words can talk about the agent to prosecute suits more. But the trustee of public funds, there are 3 seats. There's 2 right now, and there's 1 vacancy. And so, Bonnie, do you want to address the agent to prosecute and defend suits and the trustee of public funds for this body?
Agent to defend suits, I would like to look into a little bit deeper and see if it still needs to be an elected position.
Okay.
Or whether at a town meeting we can move that to an appointed position.
Okay.
So I still have to look into that. Trustee of public funds, within the last 2 weeks, we did receive a resignation from one of the trustees, which has since your last election and this meeting, since we have been notified of that position. So this would be the first time that you're aware of the fact that there is a seat open for the trustee of public funds.
Okay, great. So then this board may or may not look to advertise for filling that vacancy. Is that right?
You should always, when there is an elected position that becomes vacant, you should always advertise that vacancy.
Okay, great. So I'm going to do a rundown real quick that, and then maybe we'll go back to the listers. So we're going to figure out what's going on with the Conservation Commission, how many vacancies there are or there not. We're going to ask the Trail Subcommittee to list their members since it is a subcommittee and it would just be nice to know. We're going to check in and suggest to the Finance Committee that they create the length of terms. And I think that was it. And then this board may look to advertise the trustee of public funds vacancy as well. So I'm going to write all this up and send it to Miranda. And
you may also, too, at this point in time, want to include the listers and the agent to defend suits.
Okay.
And I have been good about the listers when I first advertised for it. It's just been since that first advertisement, we had somebody vacate a cemetery commission and also the trustee of public funds.
Okay.
So this has all happened in a short time frame as well.
Okay, excellent. So now I'm going to stop talking and turn it back over to Claudette. I do agree with Mary that I would like to talk process. I think particularly since listers is an elected office, I'm kind of curious whether or not it is the prerogative of the town manager's office to advertise for that position at all. So, so I am done talking and I now have good notes for some follow-up actions with things.
And you said Rob had a question?
He did.
Go ahead, Rob.
When I was looking up the regulations, it mentioned that if there is a vacancy on the list of the lister position, that the board, the select board, can appoint a replacement. And I wasn't quite sure, and I don't know if somebody else can define it better for me. Initially, it read that the appointment would be until the next, to fill out that lister's term. And
no.
Wrong? Okay.
Well, the term, in this case, the term would expire in March.
Right.
But you will appoint until
the next
special or annual town meeting, whichever comes first.
Yeah, so
we're in a situation.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether the special town meeting took precedence over waiting for the annual town meeting.
No, it just happens to come before the town meeting in this situation. Typically, because we're doing a reconsideration vote, typically in August, we would not be holding an election. But the fact remains that we are. And there is opportunity for people to run for these open elected seats.
I am a little bit concerned. I mean, maybe we need to look at this language because it sounds like you read very specific language, Rob, and the words appointing for the remainder of the term are very different from appointing until the next available election.
But the way I did read it was until the next town meeting, and I just didn't know whether or not to interpret that as a special meeting.
I see. Okay.
Taking precedent.
Rob, this is a town meeting.
Right.
Regardless of special or not.
It sounds clear though.
Mary?
Okay.
I just think we should have a consistent process. If there is a elected official who steps down from their post, I think we should automatically advertise and see who comes up and decide whether to appoint. And I think, as John Lang has said, we should have done that in March for the listers, and we just sort of slipped our mind. But I don't want to sort of not do that going forward. We want to have a good, consistent process so that we don't overlook it, and so that, you know, citizens that do want us to serve have a chance to do so.
So Cheryl also has her hand up, Claudette, and I would just like to say before Cheryl speaks that I don't disagree with you, Mary, on process, but I think, you know, I hope everyone on this call heard how careful I was about even speaking about elected offices in general, right? Because there is, you know, that division of authority, right? So I'm like, very much I was summarizing a conversation that I had with someone who had that prerogative to speak to that, right? Which, to that end, if you're advertising for a lister's position, wouldn't the office of the listers look to advertise for that?
No, Roger, it is a select board. It is the select board that advertises forthwith.
So this is something that I would like. So in terms of process that Mary like evoked, I would like to know that too, because yes, now a vacancy, which is our prerogative, thus it's our duty to then advertise it, and then
right. And I'm happy to copy and PDF the statute to you.
That's great. And you know, I also looked up the statute too, and you know, I think it really takes the experience of someone like yourself to provide an analysis of that statute. So anyway, I think I'm being transparent in my thinking, and that's all I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Before Cheryl, I had said in another meeting that this year the process that was in place was did not function well. We had the discussion about the lister appointment. Somehow it got left off the help wanted ad. I didn't pick it up. Nobody picked it up. And thus we found ourselves in the muddle. So now I'll go to Cheryl.
Good, Cheryl.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. So one of the things I wanted to say was about the trustee of public funds, as I am also a trustee, and you are now aware of that, so that's done. With regard to comments that have been made, it is my understanding that the board should respond forthwith to appoint somebody to an open elected position, and it's valid until the next special or annual town meeting, at which point the person has to put themselves on the ballot. That's the way it runs. I would also ask Roger if your list was intended to be comprehensive.
No.
Because there's many missing parts to it. So I would offer you that there's many more groups that are missing, and usually those are in the town report. Maybe that was said earlier. I did have to take a phone call. But you know, the Land Management Council, which is comprised of 2 appointments from the town and 1 from the fire district, should a member of the Prudential Committee resign, there is a requirement to go to the Select Board to get a Prudential Committee member appointed, as well as the regular positions of clerk, moderator, treasurer. The Rec Council is missing, the fire warden's missing. So just wanted to add those to your list. If you can take that down and go to the town report, I think is a very helpful document. Again, I did provide the Select Board with the minutes from the March 11th meeting, which stated that you would advertise. And I think there are people that read those minutes that are staying involved in town government with reading the minutes and knowing what's going on. And that alone is an advertisement of an open position, regardless of a, quote, advertisement being done. And anybody has the right to serve their community. How they do it can be evaluated at the polls. Sure. I am very concerned about the way this has appeared in the process by the select board. And it's similar to things that are going on in our country. I don't like it. I think people have the right to serve their town, their community, their state, whatever. So I just wish to say that out loud to your group, and I hope you will move forward, because in example of the listers, the trustees, the cemetery committee, we have work to do. And we like to have a full group to do that work. And I think it's incumbent on the select board to do that as quickly as possible.
John, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wonder, I mean, it sounds like there was a lot behind what you were saying there, Cheryl, without you saying it. Is there a specific, so, I mean, there's been a lot of self-flagellation over this appointment season here, and certainly there were some screw-ups, but like the planning commission thing, that actually was extremely clear. And the meeting before, we said, we're going to have on the agenda in the next meeting whether to reduce the size of this committee. But since we have not taken that action, we need to advertise for the currently open positions. And then if we decide to shrink the committee, that obviously will mean that we don't need those. But we can't assume that that's going to be the vote, so we need to advertise those. So we did. The lister thing was clearly, we had talked about advertising it and we didn't. So we've talked about that a lot. And so now we're going to advertise it, and then we will consider appointments. It is not appropriate remotely for us to consider a position, an application, when no one else has had the benefit of an advertisement for it, right? And I think if we did that, we would be very rightly criticized for that. So what exactly are you concerned about that's happening in other parts of the country that you think is happening here as well?
I think that when somebody applies for a position, they deserve to be heard and they deserve to be considered. And people are aware of open positions due to the draft minutes, the final minutes of a select board meeting. And if those are the people that are interested in serving, they're going to come forward to offer their time and efforts. And I think that's a valid reason to go forward with their consideration. Not doing that seems to have an underlying issue that I don't understand.
So if I told a friend of mine that there was a position open and we hadn't yet advertised it, and so that person showed up at the next select board meeting and said, yeah, no, I understand there's a position open, so I've sent in an application. You think that would be appropriate for us to appoint that person when no one else in town would have had the opportunity to know about the opening?
I think that that's not what happened, John. I'm saying that the select board minutes of March 11th disclosed a vacancy. Those minutes are public. Those minutes are read by many people, and that information was available. It is not a secret, and therefore, it didn't happen right away. It took several months for someone to come forward with an application for that position. I think it's reasonable to give consideration to someone that wants to serve their town.
Mary, you had a comment.
I think that advertising in general in a number of different places is very different from just learning from the minutes alone that a position is available or from hearing from a friend. So I do think that advertising widely is a wise position. I just want to be more up to date on our housekeeping and have a consistent process so that people do feel like they know what's available, they know what the process is, they know if they show up, they can have a fair chance of applying for the job. And I think if we can have a better process, more people will also want to step up. It's very confusing otherwise.
I'm going to move us forward. We have the list of open positions.
With thanks to Cheryl for the tip on if you're going to create a list, make sure it's comprehensive. So I hear that critique and will follow your suggestion. So thank you, Cheryl.
And so we know we have a spot for at least one person for trustee of the public funds, one spot for agent to defend suits, one spot for listers. We're uncertain about Conservation Commission, but for at least the 3 positions that we know are open, and hopefully by tomorrow, Roger will have an answer about conservation, that we will advertise for those positions before the end of the week. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds good to me.
Yes, and I can commit to working with Miranda and Herb on that.
Was there a cemetery commission position open?
Yes, but the cemetery does the appointing. However, when I put out my next blurb to the public, it will include the cemetery, the trustees, the lister, and the agent to defend suits. Those are all elected positions.
And if we get applicants in time for the June 24th meeting, those positions will be filled until August 11th.
Actually, that is a true statement, until August 11th. So if any of them chooses to desire to fill the unexpired terms, it will be at that point.
Okay.
So I know on the listers it would be to fill the term to March 1st. I have to look into the trustees. I don't know where that term ended.
And you're talking about the August 11th ballot, though, correct?
Right, but if they get on that August 11th ballot, it will be to fill the unexpired terms.
Yes. Okay.
So if the trustee is a 2-year term, they're going to fill out that 2-year term.
But for June 24th, it will be until the August 11th.
Actually, for a candidate, they have till July 6th.
July 6th to get on the
There's
ballot.
two separate deadlines.
So,
there's a deadline for articles and a deadline for candidates.
Okay. But the candidates, if they want to run after August 10th.
No, if they
want to continue in the role that they're possibly appointed to by the select board, they need to get their petition into you by July 8th. 6th, excuse me.
That should be in the ad, because it's a lot, for people that wouldn't know that there are deadlines and so forth.
Well, no, because you're kind of talking two different things, Mary. You're talking an appointment from now until.
That's true. Okay.
And if you make the appointments and say they choose not to run in August, then I would have to look to see if those would become vacant again or not.
Right.
And I would have to ask the Secretary of State's office that question. If you appointed somebody to the term and we had a special election in August, does that appointment end with that day?
Right.
So I need to get further clarification on that.
So Claudette, at this point, you have Rob has his hand up, and then Cheryl had her hand up, and then also Pam Smith.
Rob? You're muted.
thought I did. I think we should move forward with the advertisement, in spite of the fact that our mere mentioning of that, of the openings, should be adequate for whoever might apply. We have this on good authority from somebody here.
Yes.
Who is next, Roger?
Cheryl was next.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
I think I'm unmuted. Yeah, so, just to work with Bonnie on this, it's my understanding a select board appointment is good until the next special or annual town meeting, and then the person has to run for the position at that point. That's my understanding of the statutes. And
to fill the unexpired term.
When they run at the real town meeting time, they run for the rest of the unexpired term.
No. If somebody has a year and a half or 2 years left on their term, if they run August election, then they're filling that 2-year term.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay.
Yep. And the position for trustees of public funds would have expired in 21.
That's what I thought. I just had to verify that. So that person, if they were to run August 11th, will expire March 2021. If a term is going to expire March, again, 2020, right. So this election will bring them to the next town meeting where they'll have to run for the full term again, because the person sitting in that seat prior to them would have had to run March of 2021.
Okay. Right. And I'm just trying to clarify an appointment prior to that special town meeting.
So
correct. It'll be good until August 11th. Correct. But I have to check with the Secretary of State's office to see if that office were to become vacant again, if no one chooses to run at August 11.
And my last comment is thank you, Roger, for the acknowledgement of a comprehensive list.
Sure. I mean, I think it was really about like starting this conversation, creating a process, being accountable, right? And I think we always want more of all of those things, and we do the best we can and be transparent in our thinking. Pam Smith is next, Claudette.
Go ahead, Pam.
Hi, Pam Smith, 1445 New Boston Road. Just want to kind of clarify here, because there are some committee appointments that only the select board can appoint, and then there are elected offices. And the elected offices, you fill the vacancies until the next election, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not sure if all we're talking about here are elected positions, or if there's a mix of elected and committees that the select board appoints in all circumstances. So I'm getting a little confused by that. The trustee of public funds is elected, the lister is elected, the defender of public suits or whatever it is elected. Were there any that weren't elected positions?
Possible conservation.
Okay.
We're going to check on that.
All right. And then
and also solid waste.
Okay.
How about finance? How about finance committee?
Yeah, there is still one opening there.
So that was not to my knowledge, but I will look back at the charge, and then I will be in dialogue with Miranda.
And then the last thing was, whenever I go to the town website, I cannot find the list of open positions that you're trying to get people to apply for. I have to do a Google search, and that takes me to a link that I can click on. But to actually look on the town website, there's nothing really obvious that I have ever been able to find.
Yeah, sorry to jump in, but I don't disagree with you, Pam. I think that's like actually a real challenge. And what I really want to do is make sure that we have all of the information so I can very clearly hand that over to Miranda. So that way on the board websites or on their pages, you're able to see the names and the terms, right? So I think that's certainly a goal. And then, I can't speak to the elected offices. You know, if Bonnie and I want to like touch base on that, you know, however I can be, you know, I'm saying me a lot, but however this board can be of service to this process.
I'm talking about Herb's ad that he puts out, and it says open positions, and then it lists the different ones where you're seeking candidates. I cannot find that by going straight to the town website. I have to do a Google search and say open positions, town of Norwich, Vermont, and see what comes up in my search results and click on what I think is the most obvious link. I cannot go to the town website and find this link.
Well, and hopefully we will get it in a place, this next list, in a place on the website that's easily found. That would be wonderful. Another part of the goal.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. So sounds like we have a plan. Does everybody agree we have a plan?
Yes.
Okay.
The plan.
The plan is Roger's going to check with conservation, and then work with Miranda and her to get the list, the help wanted list, out by Friday. Monday at the latest. Gives you, is that workable?
Thumbs up from the Zoom screens. Okay.
All right, then we're gonna move on to the town manager's report. You're on, Herb.
Yep, I'm coming. Just writing down my task for Friday. So the in the packet is my latest written report. Due to time constraints during that week when I had collective bargaining and mediation at the same time frame, I wasn't able to put it in my pretty format. So hopefully no one was offended with that. But basically, so I gave you what I think are the more salient bullet items in that. If anybody has any questions with regard to that written report, feel free to ask. There also included a couple of the other department head reports. Just today or last night, Chief Frank was able to get her monthly report out. So that's in the usual locations that she posts. So you can see that out there. And I'm sure that will make its way into the next your next meeting as under the regular sort of correspondence town manager report. I had just I think I'm going to let my written report stand in the interest of time tonight. The only other thing that I would mention is that there have been a couple emails that I sent out to you folks. One was doing some cash flow analysis with regard to what we've typically spent in the first, on a monthly basis between July and December. So I'm tried to sort of give you a flavor of the kind of thing that we look at with regard to expenditures. I didn't include the revenues as part of that only because typically, your revenue source are taxes. So when you send out the tax bill, that all becomes encumbered. You do it in 2 installments. So basically, during 2 installments, you get each of your 6 months worth of the majority of revenue. But to dovetail with that, the fund balance as of today is showing essentially a $1.1 million undesignated fund balance as we have right now. We still have a couple payrolls and a few AP warrants to go, but it's still going to be pretty good for the end of the fiscal year at this point. And that's even that 1.1 million fund balance even takes into consideration the negative 300,000 fund balance that you had starting the current fiscal year out. So that's good.
So sorry, that's not equivalent to our bank balance though?
Correct. Yeah, the bank.
And does it still include any IOUs from other designated funds or anything like that, or is it all actuals now?
So that's all. So the balance sheet that I sent out today is all the actuals. So you can see the checkbook balance that's in there. You can see the individual accounts receivable and accounts payable that are out there. All the designated fund balances that are in there individually. When you put that all together, the undesignated fund balance is that 1.1 million, and I verified that with our auditor today.
Excellent. Thank you, Herb.
Okay. And Herb, I hadn't seen that email. And okay, never mind. Thank you. Any questions from the board?
And just one point before sorry for interrupting, Claudette, just on that, I want to make sure that you understand on that balance sheet that you got today, that is to date. So when we get to the financial reporting at your next month's meeting, that's going to be through May. So the balance sheet that you're going to get then is going to be a little bit backward in time, just so you'll know. So don't be confused with the balance sheet. I could purposely leave the balance sheet out of your next meeting to minimize confusion, but I just wanted to make sure in the normal course of reporting, you're going to get the 11th month period, which is the end of May. And typically the balance sheet would be through that period of time. The only reason why I created a balance sheet today was basically Chris Katuki was looking for a copy, and I was basically providing that to him. I copied you on it because I thought it was pretty cool to see the undesignated fund balance. So okay. I just want to make sure there's no, misinformation as we move into the next meeting.
And I guess I will mention the, at least for the first few months of the fiscal year, the new fiscal year coming up, there has been discussion about not funding all of or any of the appropriations. So until we see what our tax.
I think that just like Jamie Teague has been doing with the school district in terms of looking at doing some cash flow analysis. I know that you and I, Claudette, have had some emails going back and forth, and one of them, and just examining this, typically we make our payments to the designated funds, the new appropriations from the budget in that shortly after the August timeframe, so sort of the September timeframe. There's no requirement that you have to pay them right up front. So you could hold off on those until you realize more revenue and then make the payments later on in the year. And as I said before, I've already, the Department of Public Works is on hold for even advertising for the position and a half that they're authorized for under the coming budget year. So again, I'm trying to save money where we can in anticipation that the tax rate's going to get out late, meaning the first installment's going to be delayed.
And has there been consideration about talking to the department heads, trying to go 23% of budget for the first quarter versus 25?
We've had some preliminary discussion. I have a department head meeting coming up this coming Tuesday, where I'm going to have some more discussion about that. But yes, okay. And also for the end of this fiscal year, just basic, even though the undesignated fund balance looks good, still trying to monitor and not spend money where they don't need to through the balance of this fiscal year, so that we don't get any kind of a carryover or realize some bills that we might not have some cash flow for if we have to pay them, if they get encumbered into the July for this fiscal year but get paid in July.
Okay.
I just want to make sure the payments, we're keeping things as lean and mean as we can.
Cheryl has her hand up, Claudette.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Thank you. I'd like to ask this in the most kindest of ways. But in your report, Herb, you have a bullet item that says spending an inordinate amount of time completing a formal request for information. It just seems unnecessary to write it that way, but there's a lot of things I think you're spending a lot of time with Is there a reason to highlight that one that way?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a request that typically, I need to reply to within 3 to 5 days. I did meet the statute with regard to replying to that. It's taken now, Doug can clarify, it's taken 6 weeks to get them as much as I could, which would be all emails with regard to Tracy Hall that I have in my inbox and outbox that through the February timeframe. And that pile, if you saw on my desk at the last meeting, was up this high, 6 inches of paper to go through and have to spend literally an inordinate amount of time to look at every single email. It's not just a search on my thing, because a lot of the emails don't necessarily have the subject title that relates to what the specific request was for. It's an extremely unusual request for information.
Okay. I'm going to move us forward to the next item on the agenda. The special town meeting warning. And I was looking for the timeline that Bonnie had pointed out. I believe
Just after the town meeting warrant, I think.
Yeah, and I've lost everything. For when we need to have this warning, I believe we have to finalize it tonight.
You can't quite finalize it yet because the ability for a petition is still there to place an article on the ballot. And it's there until June 25th. So the 25th is the last day for articled petitions. Right, which would go in the warning. So
presumably
it would be,
we can approve what's here with part of the motion being as it may be supplemented by any additional qualified petitions or something like that, right?
Yes.
Or we could just wait until next meeting.
Now, so the last day to accept these petitions would be June 25th. So I would say June 26th, and I'm not looking at a calendar right now, would be the day for you to sign the warning, and then the first day for me to post it would be July 2nd.
Would it make sense, Claudette, to move your meeting on June 24th to the 25th? Because the 5 o'clock would be the deadline for the petitions, if I'm correct, or 4:30 or 5 o'clock. You would then know, and any petitions that come in during your meeting, you can decide. Especially the concern I have is if you get any petitions that are essentially non-binding, not money,
right?
That you would have
advisory
to whether to put them on or not.
What is the board
think? You could deal with all of that during your regular meeting.
It'd be good logistically. It's a Thursday, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know that screws up people that travel a lot, but
Are there those people anymore?
But that's just a suggestion logistically.
Is there objection from any of the?
That's fine for me.
Fine for me.
Okay, so yeah, then I propose that we move our meeting from the 24th to the 25th. Get it all done in one fell swoop.
Right, and only monetary articles have to go on. So if there are advisory petitions, that would be up to the board whether or not to put them on.
Okay. So we could actually defer the rest of this discussion until the 25th.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Good for me.
Okay, I'm going to sign off.
Okay.
Thank you, Bonnie.
You're welcome. Good night.
And
so, in a similar vein, given that we're well over an hour behind, can we postpone item 10 I'm not even, was this driven by the town manager's office, or was this just your initiative, Claudette?
It was driven by VLCT, and there's a deadline for when
No,
they.
no, not the lack of government resolution, the transfer station stuff.
Oh, it was, yeah, there's, but I can tell you what I would say about the transfer station fund. Leave everything as it is.
Oh, one thing
Great.
about.
Not sure we needed.
I think in just reading it over, I don't think the sticker price is current. It said 30, not 35.
Well, and that's part of the problem, because if you go to the website.
Well, you go to the website.
I just.
What I pay when I go there, so.
Yeah, I mean, we're like I said, we're way behind here, and I do sort of have a philosophical problem with us getting into this level of detail of town operations. If one of us or several of us think that there's a problem with something going on at the transfer station, I'd like that to be something that we ask Herb and Larry to take care of and come back to us with a suggestion, rather than, I really don't want to dig into this, quite frankly.
I don't want to dig into it either. It was the request by Herb because the new stickers need to be purchased by residents July 1. But in looking at all of the information from Hartford and Lebanon and stuff, and our own website, it's kind of a mess. And but I was also part of the person that was supposed to be looking at the fee schedules.
Right, that's what I was.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I forgot that. So if Herb initiated it, then that's great. That's exactly what I was saying.
And so he wanted to break it down. He recommended breaking it down and just looking at the transfer station right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a lot of recommendations, but I don't want to discuss them. In fact, I want to leave the sticker price and the coupon price at the same. It's what the pricing issues are all with the waste of the C&D, and we don't have a way to measure to weigh anything, and it's just a mess.
It's subjective. Yep.
So I'm recommending that we leave the fees for the coupons and the stickers, actually everything right now, exactly as they are, and hopefully we can get more solid waste people and we can really dig in at this.
So how does, I mean, I don't want to talk about this a whole lot either, but in the written materials, the sticker fee is different from what you pay at the transfer station.
And what I'm saying, Mary, is that I went off of our town website to find these fees, and I found 2 documents, and they didn't agree.
Right.
So if people are, so at least we need to get everything current.
That's true, except if we go with this, okay, well, if we just maybe amend what was in the packet just to bring the sticker fee from 30 to 35, that would do it for me.
The packet was just informational for you guys as to what I was doing. I don't think we need to do anything with that. We can just
keep everything
as it
is.
Right.
No action.
That's
Information.
So if we're keeping it the way it is, why do we need to do anything?
We don't.
Okay, good. So we can move on?
Yes.
Yay. All right.
Box culvert.
Woo! Box culvert. Okay.
And this is gonna.
Is Larry Hun in with us, or Herb, are you going to intro it for us?
I can help to introduce this, yes, and Larry's here to be my, support and answer questions. Essentially, what we're trying to do is get this project done within this construction season, with the idea that going along the same vein of the last meeting where we talked about trying to do this as expeditiously as possible because of the costs that potentially can be incurred with this, which is A lot of it related to the lowering it to one lane or narrowing it to one lane and having some signals in a rented capacity, which is about $31,000 every 6 months. So in your purchasing policy, you do have a number of exemptions that you allow, one of which is in a competitive bidding process. You are allowed to have an exemption for engineering related services that if you go through a process to define a qualified engineering firm, you can negotiate a price and for a contract after the selection of that particular consultant based on qualifications. What we think is reasonable is that we went through a Tiger Town culvert engineer selection process for basically engineering, scoping, and permitting for a box culvert, a couple box culverts, which turned out to be Stantec, which you agreed to contract with and move forward with. So where Larry and I are trying to defend stuff is to say, well, we've gone through basically that whole process was a separately formal bidding process done through a separate technical from cost proposals. So the consultants that filed proposals were weighed or ranked on the merits of their technical proposals first. In other words, their qualifications. Stantec came up first. When we opened up the cost bids, they became the most responsible, least cost bid in that process. So in trying to get an engineer on site to get us the engineering, the scoping, and the permitting necessary to replace this culvert, what we'd like to be able to do is get your authorization or approval to use that exemption in the purchasing policy to be able to hire Stantec or to have Stantec do that and get going on that. So then we can continue, once we get some stuff, we can get a bid out there and all that to do the replacement of the box culvert, which again would minimize the use of those signals and $31,000 every 6 months. Larry has spoken to Stantec. They are available to do the work should we proceed in that fashion. If you didn't do the exemption, basically what we got to do is go out to bid for an engineering firm.
John?
So sorry, I just want to make sure I understand. So you're asking for the exemption to hire them presumably on an hourly basis to just do the first piece of work, and then you're still going to bid out the main construction piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I'm supportive of that.
Awesome. Pam Smith has her hand up, Claudette.
Before we go to Pam, does any other board member have a question? I have one. Where's the money?
So what we're hoping to do, as I mentioned at the last meeting, is we're hoping to be able to get permission from VTrans to take the money from the Chapel Hill engineering project to swing over to the box culvert.
So sorry, we had a whole meeting where we talked about this and we approved the spending of the money. So please, I really don't want to have another conversation of how do we pay for something we already agreed to pay for just one meeting ago. We can't just have the same conversation over and over and ever get done before 11.
Our last meeting, the funding was contingent on getting, or where the money was coming from was contingent on whether or not we could get VTrans to allow us to use the Tiger Town Road or the Chapel Hill money or something like that. But I'm guessing that VTrans is still up and out.
I thought we decided that this was something that has to happen and has to be fixed. And if we can mitigate that cost in one of various ways, that would be terrific, but we have to do this.
We decided we had to do it, yes. What we hadn't decided was where the money was coming from. But I know we have designated funds in Bridge.
Yep.
So, okay, so, but any other questions from the board? Pam, go ahead.
Yes, Pam Smith, 1445 New Boston Road. I'm wondering why we would spend $31,000 to keep one lane open, set up the traffic signal when we could just close that road. There are a number of ways of detouring around that particular location. There's Bowen Hill Road that takes you up to Waterman Hill, back to Union Village. You could take Campbell Flat Road over to Academy Road, back to Union Village Road. There's no reason to spend $31,000 on a signal. If you can close Route 5 for 18 months at the Pompanusick River, while that bridge is rebuilt, you should be able to close Route 132 for a few months while a box culvert is built. So why are we spending $31,000 on this? There's a way to mitigate cost.
Herb, Herb or Larry?
So basically I would, the recommendation to me was to allow traffic to continue through there, but in a reduced lane situation. That I'm not saying that isn't a possibility. There would clearly have to be some sign packages purchased and put out, including in area towns. So it's not an alternative that isn't on the table from that standpoint. But I think in what we were trying to do was to try to have as minimal impact to the patterns that are out there, especially since that's a truck route and a higher volume road for vehicles.
But
And
you're almost at the
Larry
Thetford
had-
line, and so most of the traffic is coming from Thetford and Stratford, not from Norwich.
Unfortunately, the box culvert's in Norwich.
It is, but the heavy traffic is not Norwich traffic.
Why would that?
The traffic's not the issue with regard to its destination or beginning. It's the fact that the box culvert needs to be replaced. There is a high volume of traffic that's on there. We've got to, we have to either, as you say, stop the traffic or allow it to go through in a slower, safer fashion.
I believe Larry has his hand up, Claudette.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend either one of those alternates. It's my understanding that Route 132 has quite a bit of truck traffic. I know that I was, several meetings with a lot of loggers about using 132 when we were talking about winter hauling permits. I would say that Waterman and Bowen are definitely not roads that I would want to put a lot of heavy traffic, particularly truck traffic, down over. And I'd have the same concern about going over the covered bridge and coming on Campbell Flats. So those are the two reasons why it would be my opinion that those wouldn't serve very well for heavy traffic. And I don't have any traffic counts, but it's my understanding that there's quite a bit of hauling and truck traffic on those roads.
I changed my name temporarily to say Roger Arnold of Route 132, and I can anecdotally offer that there is many logging, many trucks. I can't imagine rerouting traffic unless you have a permanent police presence on Route 132. Pam Smith has her hand up, Claudette.
Go ahead, Pam.
I just don't think that the truck traffic is reason enough to spend $31,000. And if it's a speed issue, then post it. There's weight limits, there's speed limits. There's no reason to spend $31,000 on this. Like I said, they closed Route 5 for 18 months while they rebuilt that bridge over the Pompanusick, and everybody made do.
I think diverting onto very small residential roads is a very different thing. I would be in agreement.
Union Village Road
Larry.
isn't a small residential road.
Anyway, I'm going to move this discussion. So is there a select board member? Pam, I hear what you're saying, but then I'm also going to ask if there's a select board member willing to make a motion.
I'll do it. I move to allow the town manager to exercise an exception to the purchasing policy under Section 11A, competitive proposals, allowing for Stantec Engineering to proceed with engineering scoping permitting for a replacement of the box culvert on Route 132 near Bowen Hill Road as referenced in the June 9th, 2020 email from Herb Durfee to the Select Board.
Is there a second? John, was that you?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
John, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, only because I think we can find other ways to save money. And 132 is a major, it's listed as a major artery in the town plan even, so. Okay, then we're gonna move on to number 10, the Vermont Local Government Resolution. Should we
just start with the motion on this one? I don't
Yes.
think it's very controversial.
Please start with the motion.
I move to approve the resolution stating that all cities, towns, and villages in Vermont are essential as presented in the meeting's packet.
Is there a second? Rob is a second. Any further discussion? So for members of the public, this was a letter from, if you haven't looked at the packet, from generated by VLCT, just arguing with our federal legislators, or trying to convince them, not necessarily Vermont's, but others, that municipalities have been hit hard by COVID-19, and we want them to be more lenient in how those funds are being used, and how the allocations out of the federal government are being used, can be used. So, not hearing any further discussion, I'll call the vote. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. I'm gonna hold off on any COVID-19 stuff because it's changing like 2 and 3 times a week. Unless there's something very specific that Herb wanted to mention, and he's saying no. The June 24th agenda, Herb, do you have?
25th agenda.
25th agenda, June 25th, excuse me. Thank you for pointing that out, Mary.
So the list that I have here, that's potential or what have you. So it's got a few things on it, so bear with me. One would be technical assessment recommendation based on discussion that Rob and I have had on, which is going back to that SimQuest thing with regard to things. Number 2 would be Brown Schoolhouse Road Bridge contractor selection. 3 would be the possibility of entertaining a town green bandstand banner policy. Number 4.
What was the catalyst for that, Herb?
The catalyst for that is I've received a couple calls about the a banner currently in the bandstand area. Not that their people are not opposed to it, but it's the is there a policy that allows that sort of stuff to occur, which there isn't. So what I'm trying to, there was one that I had in Fairhaven that I dealt with. So if you guys are, I'll show it to you if you're willing to enter.
I remember writing the banner policy. That's why I ask. And
yeah, because we definitely have one.
You have a banner.
What, for banner for over there, or the banners on the Main Street posts?
I thought it covered both.
I believe it included the gazebo.
Oh, okay. So then, all right, great.
And so just to be clear, it would just be a matter of whether or not the Black Lives Matter sign conveyed had the same sizing that was specified.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So, because it wasn't that per se, it was what, for me, not remembering that we had that, it was all of a sudden something popping up, and how would it, in terms of the regulation enforcement, that sort of stuff. That's all. Let's see. So you've gotten a request from one of the area communities with regard to trying to change Route 132 to reclassify it to a Class 1 highway proposal. So that's what's happening, is that there's a request from one of the communities, it might be Thetford, to get 4 communities together to try to get that reclassified. So this is literally out of the blue, different from anything I've been dealing with regard to the box culvert. So that's coming up. 5, the fire department has a request to use some designated funds that goes back to whether they get a passive grant or not with some gear. The Vermont Agency of Transportation is still trying to get their regional concerns meeting with regard to the bridge overpasses on I-91. They seem like they really want to have a regional concerns meeting. I've tried to get them to do it either as a standalone meeting, which they're willing to do outside of your board meetings. But I do get the sense too that they kind of would like to be able to appear before you. I've at least told them that they're not going to have an hour on your agenda. They said they could get it down to 20 minutes, but I told them maybe somewhere between 10 and 15.
And Herb, I thought that they came back with the June 24th meeting was not, they said
right.
July, they had July.
Right, so what I want, so basically it's kind of scheduling when you want to have that meeting. They are available to do either the first or the second meeting in July for that. So it's really just trying to set that up more than anything else. I think you had town plan implementation at some point, just a reminder on that. And then you'll have your May financials.
And the warrant.
The warning, yeah.
Warning.
Right.
And what I had is that by then we should have some idea. John, has anybody from the Two Rivers, or have you heard anything from the regional energy coordinator position? Because last I knew Fairleigh had not voted it down. How did that change? There's a bunch of stuff we don't have in info.
Right, so I missed the first meeting, which was I think sort of right after I was asked to do that. I wasn't aware of it. I don't think there's been a new one scheduled yet, has there, Herb?
I'm not aware of one, but they did advertise the position. Two Rivers did, and I think I gave that to you in one of your correspondence files at one point.
Yeah, and they still listed Fairleigh in there as being one of the giving towns, and I thought Fairleigh had voted that down at their town meeting.
Okay.
I think it was Barnard who voted it down, and they were reaching out to Fairleigh to sort of make up the loss, but I don't know if Fairleigh ever signed on. And so that's why that's when
I think that's right.
That's when we had that conversation about like commitment.
Okay. So hopefully, I don't know what the deadline was for the applications for the position, but if the school board meets no, they won't meet again. So the Dresden MOU is pushed off until at least August because they don't have a scheduled meeting in July.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's all I have right now. Everybody, any other things that pop up? I'm sure things will pop up. So having
just a reminder that we said that we would have some
policies.
July. So June 25th is not quite July, but it's looming.
Yep. So policy revisions.
And Cheryl has her hand up.
Yes, Cheryl.
Might you have appointments on that agenda?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Thank you. Appointments. And if there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
You sure you don't want to abstain, John? And Claudette?
Saving up for that.
So adjourned at 10:15. Thank you, everybody.
It was a hard
Thanks,
one.
guys.
Our executive sessions went longer, but they were good.
So productive.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks
Yeah.
you all.